Historically, body modifications have been considered religious, cultural, or spiritual rituals. A physical alteration to the body is technically considered a broad category, which is practiced for a wide variety of reasons. Depending on the context, it may be cultural, rites, social, religious, or aesthetic. At the same time, fashion is also a popular style at a particular point in history. Since I have always wondered where certain styles came from, I looked into the matter, did some research, and presented some information to you. Coming up, the top 10 ways of ancient practices of body modification. Number 10. Tattoos. Tattoos have also been around forever. It was a common costume in ancient Egypt, in what is now France, Portugal, and Scandinavian countries. Based on 12,000 years old prehistoric tools that we found on sites, it is said that tattoos were applied as a healing method, religious worship to gain status, magical properties, accomplishments, or even punishments. The tradition started to fade away with the rise of Christianity, which viewed tattoos as something barbaric. It was later on brought back by overseas travels in the 16th century, by the influence of indigenous people, and was brought back to Europe. Then sailors and poor people had some. Then came a time when only the bourgeoisie could afford them. They slowly became cheaper, and since the 60s, the hippies made this rebellious act acceptable again. Now in America, about 30% of people have a tattoo, and the numbers keep rising. Today it's mainly used for fashion purposes and is more and more welcomed in professional and social environments. Number 9. Scarification. Archaeological evidence showed that scarification is the act of deliberately making scars on the skin, by skinning, cutting one's skin and taking it away, or abrasion, rubbing ink or chemical agents on it, to get the desired designs. It was utilized in 800 BC, when a statue of the fertility goddess was found in Ain Ghazal, Jordan, with deep signs of scarification around the buttocks and abdomen. We found proof of the operation everywhere aside from Europe. Signs demonstrate scarification being either employed as a social, cultural, or political gesture, rites of passage, and age grades, to promote a sexual attraction and enhance sexual life, group and cultural identity, spiritual relationships, aesthetic values, medicinal, healing rituals, demonstrating the ability to endure pain. Now it's mainly done by teenagers as an act of despair, punks, fraternities, and sororities, or for the nostalgia of the exoticism being ancient societies, or to look different, good, and unique. Number 8. Hair coloring. It is estimated that cave people used ginger to dye their hair millions of years ago during the Stone Age. Henna was used by the ancient Egyptians to cover gray hair, and different plant extracts were used to cover red, blue, green, and gold. In the beginning, the Romans and Greeks used lead oxide and calcium hydroxide. Later, they began applying fermented leeches since the other combination was too harmful. To promote their careers, Roman prostitutes were required to dye their hair yellow. It was by accident that the first modern dye was discovered in the late 19th century. Professor William Henry Perkins was trying to find a cure for malaria, but he occasionally created the formula we use today. The only downside back then was the colors, a pinkish purple. About 50 years later, L'Oreal made the first commercial hair dye. Today, more than half of the women in the US color their hair, and more than 2/3 did it at least once in their lifetime. Number 7. Piercings. It's hard to tell why, how, or when our love for puncturing holes in our bodies started. The oldest mummy ever found, dating from 3300 BC, called Otzi, had his ear pierced. It was mostly a male accessory. Julius Caesar had his ear pierced. Pharaohs were the only ones who could have their navel pierced, and anyone else found with this piercing was executed. Genital piercings for men in ancient Greece and Rome were used for sport and to prevent slaves from having sex. Septum piercings were popular among tribes, to make warrior men look more threatening. Aztec and Mayan shamans and priests would pierce their tongues to communicate with the gods. Sailors would pierce their ears so that if they were found dead, someone could pay for their funeral. By looking at how outspread and relatively constant through the history of humankind, that piercings are here to stay. Number 6. Branding. Branding or stigmatizing, burning the skin to leave scars, is often executed with metal and fire, although many other techniques have been developed throughout the centuries, such as moxibustion, with incense, with chemicals, with small iron bars, striking, electrosurgery, branding, freezing, cold iron, and cautery pen. Historically speaking, branding was largely used for livestock. This probably reinforces the feeling of guilt, shame, and humiliation when forced upon humans. Ancient Romans would, for example, burn runaway slaves with the letter F. Among other cultures, they would burn slaves as proof of ownership. In the same line of idea, prostitutes were branded and are still branded by their pimp or their owners. Criminal as public humiliation, specifically when it's on their forehead or cheeks, physical punishment, and an indelible criminal record. Today, branding has lost some of its negative connotations. People used it as an identity, body decoration, rites of passage in fraternities, or even as a religious initiation in some sect like Vaishnavism because it would supposedly heighten the state of awareness. Number 5. Skin bleaching. Although, skin whitening practices weren't well documented. But we know that, throughout time, famous figures have done it. Queen Elizabeth was using arsenic wafers, Cleopatra applied honey and olive, and the Greeks and Romans were putting mercury on their skin. Initially, it was probably used to cover birthmarks and dark patches. Then a simple stigma was created: white is pure and black is evil. Later on, pale skin has been associated with wealth and status, because only the rich could afford not to work the fields, therefore not being exposed to the sun. Throughout the ages, people put chalk or dust, powder, paint and white lead, paint, mercury, and cashew milk. Many of which were detrimental to one's physical and mental health. But it seems that status and opportunities are more important than certain side effects such as hair loss, skin corrosion, muscle paralysis, tooth deterioration, blindness, premature aging, developing skin cancer, etc. Ironically, since the time of independence, skin bleaching gained popularity in African diasporas, as colonies were using commodity racism, whiteness as a way to sell their products. Even more ironic, in the 1930s it became a sign of wealth among people with pale skin who have a tendency to want it to be darker with sun tanning cream or a tanning machine, or excessive exposure to the sun at a seaside resort. Seems like everyone wants what they don't have. Number 4. Plastic surgery. The history of plastic surgery dates back more than 4,000 years. Physicians mainly used skin grafts to correct facial injuries or as healing methods. In the Middle Ages, the rise of Christianity created yet another shift in human beliefs and behavior. Science fell into the hands of religion and mysticism. Surgeries were then prohibited by church law, by Pope Innocent III. But during the Renaissance, advancement went on, eyelid surgeries were performed, and perhaps the foundation for surgical breast reduction. Then, the First World War caused significant advancement. Military physicians facing modern weaponry had to implement innovations and reconstruction methods to give back people a good physical appearance, which was already linked to a high degree of success. It started to be more mainstream in the 60s and the 70s with the discovery of silicone. As plastic surgery became more affordable, surgeons were then forced to do more cosmetic surgery. As now Botox is our anti-aging go-to, shows like Extreme Makeovers, are controversial but still extensively watched. Over 1.8 million cosmetic surgeries were performed in 2018, and the numbers are increasing and the age of participants decreased. Number 3. Dental modification. Having a crooked smile was perhaps always frowned upon. Ancient societies would use cords made of catgut, a fire found in the intestine, instead of metal brackets to correct dentistry. In Bali, canines were being filled down because they represented anger and jealousy. Many tribes, up to this day, like the Amhara, Azanda, Maasai, and Nuer, are still filing their teeth or removing them for spiritual purposes or would sacrifice them to gods. In 100 AD, Mayans displayed their wealth by carving symbols or inserting jade directly onto their teeth, which we could now compare as the ancestor of grills for rappers. Because of poor hygiene and the lack of technology, these modifications would come with loads of risks, pain, infections, and deaths. Today, a trip to the dentist, or orthodontics, is something almost trivial and accepted. Having straight white teeth is a must, and braces are in a sense their rite of passage towards beauty. On the other hand, fillings and the ablation of an extra set of teeth in our society have a strictly practical function. Number 2. Bodybuilding. In the 17th century, weightlifting was accompanied by a car pulling and lifting animals. It would attract crowds that would follow the strongmen. Later on, in the 20th century, competition like Mr. America took over and grew over the years, becoming a humongous competition up to the 1950s and 1960s. Perhaps were and will always be wired to be attracted by strength and healthy bodies. Spartans or gladiators in Rome, Prussian, or the way that Greeks would train themselves in gymnasiums to develop their strength goes way back. From there it made it to India, where resistance training with dumbbells emerges. Today, the amount of people working out is bigger than ever. Men and women are getting ripped, and the usage of protein shakes or other substances is acceptable. Moreover, going to the gym is a trend, looked upon as something good. Being cut for men, and at least fit for women, is a beauty standard. Number 1. Tongue splitting. Tongue splitting, or bifurcation, which is the process of splitting the tongue in half as far back as the point where it intersects with the base of the mouth, isn't a new concept. Forked tongues have appeared in numerous ancient religious documents from Hinduism, Buddhism, and even Christianity. Hindu mythology makes mention of several split-tongued gods, like the serpent goddess Kaliya. Buddhist texts speak of Naga spirits with bifurcated tongues. The Bible also discusses Satan as having a forked tongue like a serpent. The actual physical practice of tongue splitting dates back thousands of years as well. The Khetri Madra yogis are one of the oldest known groups to perform tongue splitting and milking. The goal is to be able to train the tongue to flip up and back so that it plugs the sinuses and seals off areas where the body could otherwise leak energy during meditation and other spiritual enlightenment exercises. Today, in modern times, you'll find a record of a man splitting his tongue in Italy in 1994, but his experience wasn't formally documented until 1997. He had a dentist perform the procedure and then cauterize his tongue with silver nitrate. The next person on record to split her tongue was Dustin Aller back in 1996. She later documented her experience in a 1997 issue of Body Play magazine. It wasn't until the Lizard Man, Eric Sprague, and body mod pioneer Shannon Larratt bifurcated their tongues that the trend really started to gain popularity in Western culture, though. In the years since, progressively more people have had their tongue split, which is an irreversible procedure. What other ancient ways of body modifications for beauty do you know? Let me know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video of the top 10 list of amazing information. Till then, stay safe.